Hey guys, it's Austin with Out Jeeping. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to install an entire front 3-link suspension on your Jeep Cherokee XJ. Now the kit I got today is by Big 6 Motorsports, and they recently changed their name. They used to be Beeley's Off-Road. So let's get started. So what all comes with this kit is we got a nice heavy-duty crossmember right here, and this is where all of our 3 links are going to go and attach to. And then we also have 2 lower control arms, and then we got 1 upper. All these links are 1/4 inch. We also have heim joints on one end of the lower control arms, and then we got a regular bushing style on the other side that's greasable. And on the upper link we have a heim joint, and then we have a press-in heim joint that goes into our axle. This is going to be replacing our rubber bushing that's already there, so we're going to have to pound that out and put this in. But today's video is going to be part 1 to the part 2 series. Basically, I'm going to be installing the crossmember, which is probably going to be easy. It's not going to take too long, so we're going to knock that out right away. So for this crossmember, we have 3 holes on each side, and they are basically going to bolt straight up into the frame. You basically have to drill and tap them out to a 1/2 inch, and they have provided bolts that come with it along with lock washers. Now if you have a 2000-2001 Jeep Cherokee XJ, you actually need to get a new transmission mount for the 99 and down, and since mine is an 01, that's what I did here. So I bought this off of Amazon. It's made by Anchor. It's about 20 bucks, and basically they just have offset holes on the crossmember instead of the centered ones. So it's not too big of a deal, you just get to replace your transmission mount at the same time. Now part 2 of the series, we're going to be installing all these links, and I'm going to be showing how to take off your old ones, put the new ones on, and set the right caster angle with an angle finder, because that's always important. You want to make sure you have good driveline angle with your front drive shaft and have good caster. So let's get started. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is remove the old crossmember. So I'm basically just going to take a floor jack with a piece of wood and lightly put some pressure on the transmission pan. Now depending on if you have a transfer case drop or if you just have the factory bolts that hold on your skid plate, it'll depend on what size you're going to need. Mine are going to be a 11/16 because I just got aftermarket bolts. But if you have factory bolts, you have 2 studs on there, and I believe they're going to be a 15 millimeter. So I'm going to go and take off the 4 bolts that hold on the crossmember. Alright, so once you have all 4 bolts out for the crossmember, we got to take out the 4 bolts that go to the transmission mount, and those should be a 1/2 inch. And once you get the last one, we can take it out. Alright, so if you have to change your transmission mount, now is the time. They got 2 18 millimeter bolts on each side. And I noticed it's actually kind of loose because I didn't put Loctite on there, so we're going to do that when we put a new one back in. So one thing before you put on the new transmission mount for the 2000-2001 Jeep Cherokees is you have to grind down this little nub right here, and the reason why they have that is because it helps lock into the transmission mount, and on the older ones they don't have that. So basically we're just going to take a flap disc and grind that off. Alright, so I actually took this off since it was nice and loose, and I basically just ground it off and then hit it with some paint to prevent any future rust. Now we can just slide it right back onto the exhaust. Lines right there, and then I'm going to take some blue Loctite and I want to put it on these bolts that go to the transmission mount. From factory they do have blue Loctite on there, so you want to make sure you add some when you reinstall your transmission mount. So when putting on the transmission mount, we want to make sure that the offset goes towards the driver's side. And then we can thread in our first bolt. Now I forget the torque spec, but you want to make sure that these are pretty tight. Not too much because it's going into an aluminum housing. So for drilling out the holes in the frame, basically I'm going to start with a 2564 and then I'll work my way up to a 2764, which is the size we're going to need to tap the 1/2-inch holes. And I'm also going to put a little bit of cutting fluid just to help so it doesn't burn up. When you're drilling these, you also want to make sure that you're straight as possible, so make sure you look around at all different angles and make sure it's straight. That way when it comes to tapping, it'll be nice and straight. Now we can work to the 2764. Alright, so we're going to do that to the rest of the 5 holes and then we can get ready to tap it. Alright, so when tapping these holes, we want to make sure that we go in as straight as possible, because if you start going in crooked, as the threads get in there, it's going to start to cross thread and bind up, which we don't want. So as you can see here, I have a socket welded onto my tap. And the reason being is because I actually installed a couple of these kits on my friend's Jeeps, and the typical way you would use the tab is it would have a square end and you would use the thing with it, but it actually broke off and actually broke the tool too. So I just welded on a 3/8 socket and it seems to work better. Then I could take a 3/8 mini breaker, and then that way I can make sure I get my hands on both sides to turn it on both sides equally. I'm going to start it in the hole, apply a little bit of pressure straight up, and then we want to check and make sure that we're all nice and straight on each side. So if you need it, I'm just actually using a cheater bar over this just to give me more leverage. Alright, now we can take a bolt and test fit it. Seems like it threads in fine. So now we'll go and do the other 5 holes. Alright, so all we have to do right now is put our cross member in. It'll help if you have a friend help lift it up. That way one person can line it up while the other person is holding it. Alright, so getting this cross member up there was a little bit difficult. I had to use a rubber mallet to get the studs from the transmission mount into it because the holes are a little bit wider, but that's okay because this transmission mount is able to stretch that way. But now I got the 4 1/2-inch nuts on there and I'm just going to tighten them down. You don't want to go crazy tight on these because you can actually snap them, and then that wouldn't be good. Alright, so with these all tightened up, I'm going to jack up the transmission a little bit, and then I'm going to start all of the bolts in and start to tighten them all up in a crisscross pattern or so to gently put this all up. I'm also going to put a little bit of blue Loctite on these bolts. So with all the 6 crossmember bolts tightened down, we can go and remove the jack that's supporting the transmission. Alright guys, we got the crossmember all installed, and that's going to be it for today's video. Now make sure to stay tuned for the next video where I'm going to be installing the rest of this 3-link kit, and I'm going to be showing you all the details, even how to set your correct caster angle. So I hope you guys learned something. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Outjeeping YouTube channel to help keep these videos coming. And as always, make sure to comment below if you have any questions and I'll be happy to answer. Till next time, I'll see you guys in the next video.